They had it at the Ministry of Education. They had it at orphanages, orphanage directors.
In the meantime, we had discovered this website
that has a handful of children on it, but it was not accessible to the public, and it was just a little test thing. But he said, you know, let's look, maybe she's there.
And so Rick started reviewing the website daily.
This little girl was not there. So for the next days and days and days, morning, afternoon, evening, I checked that little site, and nothing changed on it.
He had asked me when did I think we would have a match, and I told him in all honesty, I felt that once the home study was completed and his paperwork was done and it was time to move forward on a particular child, that she would be revealed to us.
A couple weeks later on a Wednesday morning, I went to work, and about 11 o'clock in the morning, my wife Stephanie calls me at work. And she said, Rick, we just got a phone call from the agency that was doing the home study, checking our family out for adoption, for approval for adoption. She said, our home study is complete.
And sure enough, the day that the home study agency called Rick to tell him that the home study was completed, he went back on that website, and there was one picture added in it, and it was the picture of his daughter, Nadia. It's quite remarkable.
I'm sitting there looking face to face with the very little child I held in my arms in that dream. The child, not like a representation of some child, the little girl. And my secretary came in, I started crying, I called my wife, I had to talk Stephanie through how to get on the computer, and she saw her, and there was no doubt it was her.
And then when I went upstairs and looked at the picture, I said, good heavens, she looks like my eldest daughter, Maria. Exactly. It's like this little face looking back at me. It's like, I know that little face there. And as soon as he said that, they said, okay, you know, we called up the agency, that's it, you know, we're gonna go get her. It's like, okay.
And I called Ed Thomas. His people get on there. He said they got goosebumps. They said, oh my gosh, we found her.
The entire thing has been amazing and special in the fact that we found this child on this website that matched this drawing.
They contact Russia and they start the process.
We were allowed to work directly with the regional representative in this region of Russia, as opposed to having to go through the chain of command.
We, in total 100% faith, walked forward knowing that little girl would be our daughter, and that we would go there and we would bring her home.
April 16th, she came officially available and ready for adoption. So then we sort of earmarked her in that, and so then we said, okay, we've got to come over.
I'd never even dreamt in my wildest dream that I'd ever be going to Russia, more or less to go get my daughter. She was a 12-hour train ride from Moscow. That train ride, the only thing I can tell you is I stared out the window most of the time. What will it be like to walk into that orphanage and see her walk through a doorway? And as Stephanie said, not be united with her, but reunited with her. Because I knew that child already knew me. When I got in that car, I told Stephanie I felt like my legs were like jelly. It was like I couldn't believe we were this close to being with her.
It's a whole nother world there of, you know, you think you know what you're doing, but these are children who have gone through all sorts of stuff, and you have to learn how to deal with that.
We walked up those steps in that orphanage, and we sat in a little waiting room, and it seems like just seconds later, they brought her to the door. And there she was.
And they say normally they won't really look at you, that they don't have any connection too much because they haven't had people to spend time with them. And they said, don't be worried, because they've never really seen men. They've been surrounded by women all their life.
And they gave her a little nudge, and she walked right over into our arms. And it was as though we had never, ever been apart.
They looked at us, good heavens, you know, they normally scream and cry because they don't know. These little tiny ones, they push them in and say, go say hello, and they don't know you from Adam there. And she just sat and beamed, and we gave her a little puppy dog, which she hugged, and like we'd always known her. It's very strange there.
You see, Nadia was born in a town about 200 kilometers from where her orphanage was located. And when she was born, her mother had basically left her with no care in her own home, and the government found her and took her to the orphanage. They looked for her mother for 12 months.
In the end, they tracked her down in hospital because she'd been sick. And they said, okay, you know, we're looking after the child, do you want her? And they said, no. She signed her over, and they said, oh, look, they signed her over on the 23rd. And I said, they signed her over on the 23rd? I said, can you read that again? And they said, December 23rd is after a year of searching. That's the day we found the mother, and she signed the baby over to us.
And Nadia became available for adoption on the very day I had that dream.
I read in all my books there that they usually have a piano there in all the orphanages, and I thought, well, Rick being a pianist there, I thought, well, what do you do with these little kids? There's really no toys there. She hardly even walks around properly because she's so small there, so they're not going to want to play. And she was quite happy just to be held because she doesn't get to be held much there. And I said, well, you go play the piano, because with all the kids and the nieces and nephews, they all love it when he plays the piano. I said, that'll give her something to sort of draw her out of herself.
She's already playing the piano.
And she was just fascinated. I don't know if she'd ever seen anybody play the piano before, and sat on his lap, and in a matter of minutes was playing the same notes as he was.
And even the people around us, the orphanage director and the doctors and the representatives, they were dumbfounded.
Are you very clever? Are you very clever?
Gosh.
That's pretty good.
You catching this? They were talking among themselves. Why is this child connecting like this? This is a little girl that hasn't seen more than 3 rooms her entire 2.5 years. She's barely set foot outside. No one's ever held her until we saw her. No one's ever hugged her, told them they love her.
We know we want this child. Why do we have to come back again? But basically, that's the law.
The most difficult thing I ever did. The most difficult thing I ever did was walk out of that orphanage and have to get on that train to go home. And even when I got home, the days seemed like they were months. You know, and I just was determined we were getting back. I was on emails every night. We had people there who were helping us and were going to go to the judge. But I'm in good terms with her, and I asked, what about May 26th? She said, I already have 2 court dates that day, but what else can I do? I will have the 3rd. And even our representative wrote to us on an email how incredibly awesome this was, that the judges don't do this. So now prepare to travel to Russia. Natasha already has sent the invitation to you. It was sent to the New York Russian consulate for 1 month, valid the 23rd of May, June 23rd. And that was it. We went into this little courtroom. The judge asked me to please tell the story of what had happened. And I stood there in that courtroom, in their Kremlin, in Pskov, Russia, and I told the story of God working a miracle.
I think to them, before that, it was this is wonderful and these are wonderful people and stuff like that, but it was all of a sudden when they read that date and they stopped and read it again, it's like, oh, good heavens, you better go home with the kid now there, because it was like hands off. It's like, God is doing this.
She said, I cannot argue with God. What God has done is now official in the Russian Federation.
It's an official court record now in Russia. The judge said, quote, how can we fight against the power of God? To acknowledge God in a Russian courtroom by a Russian judge is miraculous, I would think.
The Court of Russia, which is a government foundation, admits that this is a miracle. I don't know what else evidence people need.
She said, take your child home. There's no 10-day waiting period, nothing, just take your child home.
The adoption is finalized. She's legally their child.